So now I get to interview David. David, proud to call you my friend, and I want to talk about your entrepreneurial journey. One day, the idea of Nubank is born. Tell us about that day.
Well, it was one of those experiences that literally changed your life, but at that moment didn't really look or seemed like that. I'm originally from Colombia, and I had moved to Brazil. And as anybody knows, the first thing you do when you move to a new country is you open a bank account. So one afternoon, I just go into one of the branches of one of the big banks in Sao Paulo, in Faria Lima, the center of financial services in Brazil. And clearly, I didn't know what I was expecting because I entered this security door with my cell phone and my backpack, and alarms start sounding because I had metal with me. Two armed security guards come to me and said, "Please, sir, step out, leave your backpack in a locker, and then you have to go back in." Then I enter back. I waited about 50 minutes so that one person clearly did not want to be helping me. I was almost begging that person to open a bank account. "Please, sir, as a favor, open a bank account for me." And that was the beginning of experience, almost 5 months of going back and forth to the branch, calling the call center, bringing more paperwork, going back to the banking branch, and ultimately getting a simple bank account. And the amount of frustration and just kind of disappointment and like really trying to understand was hard because, and this is I think where a lot of the kind of preparation had come in. I knew this was the most profitable industry in Brazil. And these were the biggest, most valuable companies in Brazil. And I asked my friends, and it was like, how is this possible? They're treating a customer like this. Is this a prison? That was probably the closest experience I could come up with. And what I really heard was, this is the way things have always been. This is the way these banks have treated people always. And this is the way that things are always going to be. And so that was the beginning of the journey that basically brings me all the way here.
So that was 10 years ago. Tell us a little bit about Nubank today.
So today, we're turning 10. My two co-founders are here, Chris and Ed. So it's been a phenomenal journey. What I would say is we heard consistently through that first year that it was going to be impossible, that I'm Colombian, you have no idea about this market, these banks are going to crush you. Customers are never going to trust you. You're going to have to build this new brand. It's impossible. We kept at it, and our goal, very ambitious goal, was 1 million customers in 5 years. And it was one of those goals that when I remember looking at that PowerPoint felt impossible because at that point we didn't even have licenses, we didn't have money, we didn't have funding. Everybody was telling us that it was not doable. But when we launched, we underestimated how ready people were. And in fact, in a way, it's almost obvious. Sometimes when people ask, what was different about you guys? It was very simple. We did not make people go through 5 months of wait. We treated people like human beings, and we didn't make them pissed off, and we didn't treat them like we were making them a favor. It's the opposite. We wanted to make these customers fanatical. And so it turns out people were ready to be treated well, which meant instead of 5 years, it took us 2 years to get to 1 million customers. And 10 years after today, we have about 93 million customers in Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia. Thank you. So about over half of the Brazilian population is a customer of us. 1 in 2 Brazilian is a customer. We continue to be one of the best rated financial products in the world since the very beginning. We have products in credit card, lending, savings, investments, insurance. We also have about 4 million micro-entrepreneurs as customers. We now have start expanding to other services beyond financial services, connecting with different partner ecosystems, from e-commerces to ride-hailing apps, creating now a different type of ecosystem for our customers. And we've started a slow regionalization expansion, having launched Mexico and Colombia over the past 3 years.
Since you're quickly running out of Brazilians, let's fast forward 10 years. Where's Nubank going to be?
So the good news is we still have a lot of Brazilians to go because Brazil, for whoever knows what's going on in Brazil, Brazil is digitalizing very quickly. There is a new system called Pix that is effectively the beginning of the end of cash. People are now using Pix to pay for everything. This means that the addressable market has gone from about 100 million Brazilians to, let's say, 180 million. Every person above 7 years old now needs an app to pay for stuff. In fact, one of the fastest growing segments for us is people at around 10 years old. So very young Brazilians are now growing really, really fast. And so we still have a way to go in Brazil. But where are we 10 years from now? So anyway, I think we think the thesis that we started maybe 10 years ago with, which was similarly as is happening in every industry, in every country, where technology companies have launched a new way to do business, generally with better experience at lower cost, will be happening in financial services as well, similarly as it's happening in retail with Amazon or in transportation with Uber or in media with Netflix. The same disruption happens in financial services, and it's a global trend. So we really are in the first minute of the first half, as we say internally in Nubank, of expanding beyond to more markets. It's a business that is hard to internationalize because you need to get a lot of licenses, and we like to go very, very deep. We like to get banking licenses wherever we go. So far, we've gone relatively slowly in that process, and we feel very comfortable with that. But our 10-year horizon, we would want to be in more countries. We see the opportunity to bring several hundred million customers as consumers eventually, serving them with both the best experience at the lowest cost, taking advantage of the cost structure that we have of not having branches or not having a lot of employees, and eventually perhaps helping to start creating payment systems around the world that interconnect these different countries, serving millions of small businesses and expanding beyond financial services in other verticals where we see very similar common denominators, big incumbent oligopolies on one end, and a lot of underserved, pissed off consumers on the other end.
Scaling from 0 to 90 million customers is hard. I know how important, and I've heard you talk about this, culture is, and this idea of customer-centric culture. How do you scale a customer-centric culture?
It's really hard. But I think a couple of things that we've done. I don't think there is one silver bullet. The first thing that I think we took to heart since the very beginning was how important it was to set up the culture since the very beginning. It was the first thing we did. I heard from my previous jobs, I haven't worked at Sequoia as a venture capitalist, that the culture of a business is built in the first 4 to 6 months by the first 10 to 15 employees. Those times are magical to set up the culture. And either you're strategic and proactive in building that culture, or the culture just gets built by itself. And so we spent with my co-founders a lot of time discussing what are we here to do? Are we here to build a better credit card? Are we here to build just a better bank? That actually did not make anybody excited. And ultimately, what I think really drove us was this kind of conclusion that the big enemy that we really were after was complexity. And the value we decided to focus on was to fight complexity to empower people. The good news is complexity is everywhere, and so it's almost an infinite opportunity, an infinite goal. And out of that, we decided that the first number one value for us was going to be we want customers to love us fanatically. It seemed like a crazy goal in an environment, in an industry where people were hating these banks, right? I remember some of these brands were the most hated brands in Brazil at that point. But we wanted to go beyond. We wanted to build these experiences that would just blow away these consumers because they were ready to be treated differently. And so I think we did well catalogizing that culture and those values since the very beginning. That gave us the opportunity to, as we started hiring the first 10 employees, the first 50, the first 100, we were always looking for technical skill set, but always looking for culture fit that allows us to build the first 100, 150 people, very solid core. That culture deck where we put those values, I sometimes compare it with the Constitution of the US. Constitution of the US is the culture deck of the US, Inc., right? 200 years in, and the US still looks at that culture deck and knows what they stand for. And we still have that deck, even 10 years in, and we have kind of a source of truth about what we really are here to do. So that helped us, and then as we started scaling, the biggest goal was making it real. It was really about integrity. Integrity is you do as you say you do. And I think this is where a lot of companies kind of forget about, and they go in a different direction. They put beautiful cultural values in the wall, and then they go do some things that are completely different, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when the pressure is there to make money, especially when the pressure is there to be profitable. And we are always very actively paranoid about that issue, and whenever we have to make a decision, especially when it's inconvenient, we try to always go back to these cultural values and keep it, making sure that we are following that path. Because if we start deviating, the moment, especially us as co-founders, people see us not really being true to those values. That's the beginning of the end of that culture across the organization. So it takes a lot of different routines. It takes your hiring, your managing process, and it takes a lot of different work. But I think ultimately, one of the things I think probably makes me the most proud, 10 years in, 8,000 employees in, almost 100 million customers in, is that culture is in fact stronger now than it was before. And that's something that I think has changed a lot of. There's always a lot of fear about how is this culture going to change as we scale. There was a lot of pressure from our early employees about how we will maintain the culture. And in fact, if your goal is to maintain the culture, that makes you very risk averse because you're trying to hold to something. And we had to flip the switch. In a way, the question is, how are we going to improve the culture? And scale gives you the opportunity to do that. Serving more customers gives you the opportunity to do that. Bringing more employees and different type of DNA gives you the opportunity to do that. So I think we've been able to integrate that in several ways, in a way in which ultimately I think our culture is stronger today than it was 10 years ago.
I've known you for a decade plus, and you're an intellectually honest guy. And there's been a lot of success, but we've also made mistakes. As an investor, I know that my biggest mistake was not investing in your Series B. My second biggest was your Series C. My third biggest was Series D. Then you stopped calling. Tell me about your mistakes.
Well, it's early days. So you can't just go buy in and buy, and then mistake erased. Let's see. I mean, I think it's been many different mistakes. I think probably the bigger mistake was we started with appropriately discarding experience as an expertise. I was a full outsider. I was not Brazilian. I had never worked for a bank. I had never worked in credit cards. And in a way, I thought that the opportunity to be an outsider is what gave me the opportunity to see this pain, the consumer pain. And so sometimes being the outsider gives you this opportunity to look at a problem with new eyes. And I think we took that for everybody. When we started, we discarded any potential experience in the market. We wanted to start everything from scratch. We wanted to reinvent collections from scratch. We wanted to reinvent credit underwriting from scratch. We wanted to do everything from scratch. And it turns out that, and then laugh because he knows how painful it was. A couple years in, we start realizing, like, what are we doing? There is a lot of truth in that expertise. It's in a way, one of their values is we're hungry to challenge the status quo. If you think about that, we want to challenge the status quo. The status quo is there because out of multiple versions of the world, that version won and became the status quo. So it was better than a lot of other versions of the world. So it's very hard to just discard it and say, let's start from scratch. But when you simply discard it, you are leaving away a lot of wisdom that in fact was created before us. So I think that kind of what I would do very differently, and sort of the big mistake was realizing that quickly, which meant bringing experienced people faster in a number of different areas. And not necessarily discard experience of the bad, but having been able to mix the outsider view that wanted to start everything from first principles, integrating it with a lot of experience and local expertise across different areas from Brazilian banking, engineering, finance, really across a number of different ways.
As you reflect on your journey, great mentors or great entrepreneurs that inspired you?
So lot of different mentors along the way, from a gentleman named Nigel Morris, who's the co-founder of Capital One. I worked very closely when I was at GA together with him, and he was a great mentor. He really kind of taught us how to look at this opportunity. My former boss at Sequoia Capital, who had been a great mentor. So I think that along the way, there's been great bosses. But there's been also another really great source of inspiration that you'll be very familiar with, which is Chuck Finney. Chuck Finney was the founder of Duty Free Shoppers. There is a great book that I read while I was at GA. GA it began as the family office of Chuck Finney, and whoever hasn't read this is one of the most inspiring books. It's called The Billionaire Who Wasn't. And it's the most amazing journey of somebody that went for decades investing and solving problems around the world, participated in the peace process in Ireland, built universities in Vietnam. And his goal was to have his last check bounce. And I just found that, when I read that book, I just found that to be such an inspirational life story, and a lot of things clicked for me in terms about, it's great to do business, it's great to make money, it's great to solve problems, but ultimately, it's even more fun to go and give that back to society and help solve a lot of different problems. And that book just kind of gave a meaning to a lot of what I was doing at that point. So that has been a pretty significant source of inspiration.
So Chuck passed this year after having lived a long and happy life where he donated $9 billion. And he failed on his goal of having the last check bounced. I think he was down to a couple 100,000 when he passed away. But he almost achieved his objective, and he's a true source of inspiration. You've inspired many of us by signing the Giving Pledge early in your career. Talk to me about the process of doing that and what you hope to achieve with your philanthropy and together with Marielle, that you guys have the foundation.
Sure, yeah, so it was that decision with my wife, very well thought through. I think it was sparked by that book. It really kind of, again, made it click, but I don't know, I mean, I think the three of us, my co-founders and I, we started in a small house in Sao Paulo. Ed lived in the second floor with a dog. He coded for 20 hours. We were going to the office early on, and we used to see all these engineers doing work, and we were just having a blast, and we were very excited about the problem we were trying to solve. We were enamored with that problem, the friction, the consumer pain. That's what was driving us. The unicorn thing, the making ton of money thing, that was not the motivation. In fact, like I always tell entrepreneurs that it's all about the journey. You really want to do the startup journey because of the journey, not the destination. And the journey is the journey of your lifetime. You're going to go in and fight the giants and fight the monsters. I reread The Odyssey a couple of months ago. And that is the journey of the entrepreneur. You go, and it's all about listening to the mermaids singing. It's all about fighting the cyclops. It's not about getting to Ithaca. It's not about getting to the end goal. And so for us, it was the journey. And we were lucky, and we worked very hard, and suddenly we built a very valuable business. And then one day, that was worth a lot of money, and that was great, and that would feel good. But again, that was not the destination. And so it just kind of created some conversation with my wife and I for a few months, and we wrote a letter. It's online, kind of thinking about this problem from first principles again, and it basically goes like this. Number one, you're not going to be able to take any money to the next life, right? We're all going to have an end, and either you use it or you don't. That's it. Number two, there is a limit on how much anybody can consume. We cannot wear more than 2 pairs of shoes at the same time. Like, why?
Your wife may disagree with it, but yes.
Yeah. She might buy the shoes, but only wear a pair of shoes. If we have 5 lunches at once, we're not going to feel good. We're going to feel really bad, right? So there is a limit. There is a final moment. There is a limit into how much we can consume. We have 4 kids, and we feel very strongly that we want to have them live the journey, right? Do the fight. We don't want it to be too easy for them. We think there is beauty in the struggle. It cannot. We want. When I look back and the struggle, the hard moments, that's when made us stronger. That's when what made us really value the journey is the times that things were hard, not when things were easy. And so, while we love our kids, we want them to struggle a bit. We want them to not have a path that is just too easy. They got to struggle a little bit. And finally, we're living in Latin America. We come from families. I was born in Colombia. My wife in Peru. We grew up in Costa Rica. This is a region of the world that has a lot of scarcity, where there is almost a big unfairness, where the place where you are born and the condition, socioeconomic condition where you're born, almost dictates completely where you end, your life journey. If you happen to be born in the right family, in the right city, you're going to have a great life. If you happen to be born in the middle of the Amazon without that experience, without a lot of access, it's going to be really hard for you. And there's no real talent to that. It was luck. So when you add up those four factors, there is an end. We cannot really consume it. We don't want to leave all of this stuff to our kids, and there is real pain in the region there where we live. Almost the natural conclusion is wanting to just give it back away. And giving it back away in a way where we make it count, when we're strategic, where we're smart, where in a way we use the talent that business has taught us to think about how to optimize the last return on that dollar. And it turns out we've now been doing this for almost 2 years. We have now a foundation. It's actually a really hard problem. We're learning and figuring out that it is. It's not as easy as it sounds. But it's a good challenge. It's one more problem that gets us excited. And so ultimately, as we went through all of that learning process, concluded that the right thing for us ultimately was to sign the Giving Pledge and try to give everything back to society.
I have one final question, and I want to travel in time. It's now 30 years from today, and Linda, who will still look fabulous and wear a sexy dress, is here to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award, and she's summarizing your life in a few phrases. What will Linda say?
First, Martin and General Atlantic invested in Nubank. They realized the trouble and they made a big investment. So that was going to happen. I haven't lost the hope. Second, Nubank expanded beyond Latin America and reached the lives of hundreds of millions of people, solving complexity and empowering a lot of people, being an inspiration, being influential. I think part of what gets us excited also Nubank is not only obviously what we're doing in financial services and with consumers and bringing more competition to this industry, but also hopefully serving as inspiration to a number of new entrepreneurs that are coming up. One of the things that I didn't mention is not only we were the first investment in Brazil for a lot of our investors, and now they made a bunch of new investments in Brazil, but also the day we signed the Giving Pledge, I received so many emails from founders saying, one day I'm going to be in that list, in that Giving Pledge. And if you think about it, what a huge change from going from, I want to be in the Forbes 500 billionaires in the world to I want to be in the Giving Pledge. Seems like small, but it's a completely redefinition of what capitalism is. Both are capitalism, but one has an end. One is a virtuous cycle of reinvestment of the wealth that gets created as entrepreneurs solve problems really all over the world. And so capitalism has a bad name these days, and I think it's unfair in a way. There are extremes, but it can work better. And in a way, it has been the only economic system that has actually removed billions of people out of poverty. So we want to, at least as a company, we want to show that positive flywheel can work and can work for society, can work for employees, can work for founders, can work for investors, and it's a system that really has a lot of power within. And finally, I wish maybe in 30 years from now we found a way to really allocate this foundation money in good investments. We're focused on education and leadership. This means having moved the needle somehow in the education sector in Latin America, having moved the needle somehow, bringing new leaders into government or bringing new leaders into private sector that are changing and moving the needle for this region of the world that so badly needs it.
David, you're a class act. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.